everybody and welcome to today's video. I am going to be talking about pixel art today because I have been deeply immersed in it over the last couple of weeks. Earlier in the month I played through Dragon Quest XI with the 16-bit retro mode turned on, and that's actually the first time I've done that. The only time I played Dragon Quest XI previously was the original PlayStation 4 release, which didn't have that retro mode in there. So that was a good reason to replay that, and I really enjoyed that a lot actually. I've also been playing through the Game Boy Saga games via the collection that has just landed on Nintendo Switch. You can check out my review on digitallydownloaded.net for my full thoughts on that, but the point here is that I am deep into the retro aesthetic right now. To contrast with that, I've also played through most of Cyberpunk 2077 before giving up on that, and I am a big fan of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, as well as a number of other big blockbuster games that have come in recent weeks and months. So I've had that contrast between pixel and the highest definition of realism available right now, and I have been reminded in looking at that contrast that in many ways I really do prefer the pixel aesthetic, and I thought I would delve into why that is a little bit in this video. It's easy to wave away the attraction of pixel art as nostalgia, and certainly there is an element of that to it. The reason that a lot of modern games that use the pixel aesthetic appeal to retro gamers is because they are designed really for them. It's to tap into that nostalgia of the way that games used to be made. And I grew up playing early era JRPGs, so of course the aesthetic that got me to love the genre in the first place is still very compelling to me. However, the more that I think about it, the more that I realize that there's more to it than just that as well. Pixel art inspires the imagination and makes games more interpretive in tone. The hyper-detailed realism of modern games has its place for sure, and I'm certainly not going to criticize games that have that modern look, but it increasingly shifts the burden of the imagination from the people playing the game to the people making the game. Given that the appeal of video games is meant to be the ability for the player to interact with the game, I think that the abstraction of pixel art and the way it encourages players to mentally interact with the game as well as physically through a controller means that in some ways pixel art is a more true aesthetic and more appropriate for video games. Now I'll explain what I mean by all of that with some examples. A few years ago I was in Japan, and at the time there was a major celebration for Dragon Quest. I think from memory it was the 30th anniversary, but I could be wrong. Whatever it was a big celebration for a major milestone for the series. And as part of the event there was a temporary art gallery that was set up that I went along to, of course, being interested in Dragon Quest in general. And in there I saw all kinds of awesome bits of memorabilia. There were old sketches in notebooks, letters from the original development team, handwritten music score, for example, to go with the original Dragon Quest. It had the works as far as the historical collection of Dragon Quest is concerned. One of the most impressive exhibits for me, however, was a series of key scenes from Dragon Quest which were printed onto a wall. It was just a small screenshot that was quite tiny because it was actually printed in native resolution, no less. Next to that, there was a massive, epic painting representing a full visualization of what the scene from Dragon Quest was depicting. So you'd see the little screenshot from the game, and then you'd see this massively, beautifully painted picture to show what that scene kind of meant. Now, a few years later, I went along to a Yoshitaka Amano exhibition, as in the concept artist for Final Fantasy for many, many years. And I had always been a fan of Amano and owned some art books of his work, but I never really thought that hard about his role in Final Fantasy. When I went along to that exhibition, I was more interested in the creative side of game development by that point, and I found myself looking at these gorgeous paintings and spending a lot of time wondering how game artists would have gone about translating these beautiful paintings into a tiny few pixels that would represent the characters of the early Final Fantasy games. And that really is the appeal of pixel art in video games for me. It's not just that they're pleasing on the eye, though of course that is important, but it's also because they offer a similar quality to well-written words in a book or a piece of poetry. Rather than tell players what to see, the art encourages the player to imagine what they want to see. Final Fantasy IV's Rosa is beautiful, for example. We know that much from the way that the game treats her as the love interest for Cecil. But the specifics in how she is beautiful is entirely up to your own sense of beauty as a person. There is no one canon understanding of what Rosa looks like, because you can't really tell from those pixels. You really have to fill the gaps yourself and create an image of what Rosa must look like. Dragon Quest XI in retro mode might lack the sweeping, expansive view of the world that you get from 3D mode, though on the other hand, it actually felt more expansive to me because I could dream up a world that was somehow even larger and more epic than what the 3D visuals were capable of, because all I had to go on was those 2D visuals, and the sense of scales were deliberately abstracted so I could really create what I wanted in my mind's eye. On the other hand, with a game like Cyberpunk, there's very little about it that's your own doing. Yes, of course, you do create an avatar, and they can look however you want them to, and in fairness to the game, the character creation set is pretty comprehensive, but other than that, you're seeing exactly what the developer wants you to see. It's not up to you what the sexy character looks like, for example. There's no Rosa situation where you're filling in the blanks about what the depiction on the screen would look like in full detail. What you are seeing is the developer's idea of sexy. There are no gaps in the environment to fill in either with your own imagination. You're seeing exactly what the game's artists have designed for the world and the environment. There is nothing that is left to the imagination in a game like Cyberpunk. Now, once again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But as somebody that does love books and the more general ability for abstract art to delight the senses through imagination, I've got to wonder at the relative depth between a game that asks you to construct an interpretation around it and a game that epitomizes the opposite of the show not tell philosophy that we're all taught is the cardinal rule of good storytelling. You go to any creative writing course or any creative course in general, and you'll always have it drummed into you that you should be showing, not telling, because telling is taking the work off the audience, and it without that ability to interpret what you're seeing, the whole work just tends to feel a little bit shallow as a result. This is particularly pertinent for video games because interpretation is a kind of interactivity, and video games are meant to be interactive. To quote the great Pablo Picasso himself, everything you can imagine is real. The key here is that when you imagine it, you make it your own experience. No two people who play the Final Fantasy Legend games will have the same experience as one another. Even if they use the same characters, do the same thing in the same order, and fight the same enemies, what they see will be different because what they see is what they've interpreted from what they've taken off the screen. These games are in black and white, for example, so what colours that they imagine the enemies look like, or the world looks like, will change. It will be different from one to the other. The way that the mostly static monsters and characters move in their mind's eye will be different. Their experience, which will be real, will be an imagined one using the basic primitive elements that they're given through the game as the foundation for their entire experience and through their imagination. As another great artist, Degas, once said, "Art is not what you see, but what you make others see." You might assume that this would mean that the realism of modern games is better art because the developers are making the audience see one thing in particular, but I would challenge that. Game developers that work with pixel art have the tools to be better artists because their capacity to make others see what they want to see is greater. It becomes a collaborative, interactive process in which the artist and the audience work together to create the full picture, and thus also creating the meaning and the artistic value of the work. By contrast, those making realistic games hamstring the audience, where interactivity is meant to be the defining quality of video games. The lack of interactivity in how we see the visuals of modern games makes for something that the audience can consume easily, for sure, and it is very easy to consume realistic games because they don't really challenge the audience to imagine anything. But in furthering its quality as a work of art, well, that is a lot more debatable, and I would certainly debate the quality of realism as an approach when it comes to making art. But anyway, that's enough of this video. That was pretty dense ideas. Do let me know what you think in the comments and whether you think that pixel art does lend itself to a kind of imagination that results in better art. Anyhow, that is enough for this video. Check out my review of Collection of Saga on digitallydownloaded.net. This whole video was a subtle way of getting you to read that, I guess. I really did love those games then, and I still love them now. Please do mash that like and subscribe button if you enjoy my videos. That way you get to watch them all. And please do hit that little notifications bell as well. I do frequently do streams of new games and old games and whatever else I find interesting. And if you mash that button, if you hit the bell, you'll get the notifications whenever I've got a stream going. Also, if you do enjoy my videos, please do consider throwing me a coin a month on Patreon, because that will help me to continue to grow what I'm doing here. This channel has grown nicely over this year. I'm very happy with how it's been going, and I would love to continue to grow it from here. But to do that, I obviously need your support. This will be my last formal video before Christmas, though I do have a stream planned for tomorrow as well, fingers crossed. But anyway, either way, I did want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas indeed. It has been a blast growing this channel and chatting with you all about various things over the year. And it's starting to get some momentum going, and that wouldn't have been possible without the amazing contributions of everybody who's watching and leaving amazing comments, and we've had some really great discussions. So thank you for that. Have a wonderful, safe and happy break. Play some excellent games, perhaps even some with pixels, and we will see you in the next video, either stream or after Christmas.